What's up, everybody? We're out here in Vancouver. It's actually the morning after the night before. Pretty nice day out today. Cold, snowing yesterday. But today, well, not today, yesterday, because we forgot to film the intro, we went to River Rock to play some 1-3, switching it up. So we'll swap it up for this vlog. We'll play somewhere that's not park. It's a pretty good vlog. We end up winning heaps, so stick around to see some of the hands. So in this hand, there's a limp under the gun, falls to the hijack. He's an older gentleman. He raises to 15. We look down on the button at 8-5 spades. Generally, I'd imagine this hand is probably a fold. It's a bit too loose as a call. But in the softer lineups, we're on the button here, we're in position with two suited cards. We're happy to play a bit looser in these kind of lineups and at these lower stakes. So we call, and under the gun calls. Pot is now $45 and the flop comes down King 10-5 with one spade. We flop bottom pair and some backdoor draws. Checks to us. We can check or bet here. I think I prefer checking. There is an argument for betting small, but we have some showdown value. Some good stuff can happen on the turn, so we just check back. Turn comes the 8 of hearts. We make two pair. The older gentleman bets 15 into 45. Pretty small bet, 1/3 pot. Probably doesn't have too great of a hand. We raise up to 60 and he folds. So for these next two hands, we are actually going to have to use footage from other hands at the table because our phone was charging in the wall. Usually we play at park and they have built-in phone chargers to the table. We didn't realise this as it was our first time at River Rock, so we're just going to use some other footage, but with the hand histories here. There's a straddle on the button, small blind limps, and we make it 30 to go in early position with the ace king of clubs. Middle position calls, button calls, and the small blind calls. There's 130 in the middle, and we go 4 ways to a flop. That is King 10-9 rainbow. So we flop top pair, top kicker. I see bet 50. Middle position calls. Turn, pot is now 230 and it comes another offsuit king. We now have trips. We're happy to continue betting for value. Try get much money into the middle. We're only losing to a small few hands. Queen, jack, king 10s, 10s, 9s. Some of these hands would a 3-bet pre-flop. So we're pretty happy with this card and to keep going for value. We bet $110 and he sticks around. Going to a river, there's 550 in the middle. Comes an offsuit 3. I shove my last 330, hoping we can get called by a worse king, maybe king queen, king jack, and to my surprise, he snaps off the bet. Quick as we got the money in, he snaps. Usually this is a bad sign. I figure we're probably up against queen jack for a straight. We turn over our hand and announce trips. He announces you're good and flips over queen 10 off. So we flops middle pair and a good shot on the flop and decides I must be bluffing and makes a pretty terrible call down. I think 4 ways to the flop. I don't think this is ever a spot where I'm bet jamming as a bluff, so I think he's just torching money by calling with queen 10. Maybe levels himself into I block queen jack and stuff like that, but I think generally it's hard to see me just blasting off with ace queen, ace jack here when we're 4 ways to a flop. In this hand, under the gun opens to 15, button flats, and we call in the big blind with ace-6 of hearts. Flop comes down 3, 4, 5, flop an open-ended straight draw, and we check to the aggressor. Under the gun checks, button checks behind. Turn comes the ace of spades, giving us top pair to go with our open-ender. We could bet here, but we decide on a check. I think under the gun is going to have a lot of better ace-x in his range when he opens from that position. So I'm happy to check here and go for some value on the river if he checks back. We get some more information about his hand when we see what he does. He checks and the button checks. River comes an offsuit 2. We now have top end of the straight. The board reads a straight. So I think we're going to bet a size here that makes it look like we're trying to steal the pot. We only lose to 6-7, but I'd imagine 6-7 bets on the ace turn. So we essentially have the nuts. We bet $60, which is an over bet. Under the gun thinks and folds, and it gets back to the button, who decides to shove all in for 240. We're only losing to 6-7, and I don't think he has it. I'd imagine he maybe has a 6 and we're chopping. We make the call and he turns over 5-5 for a flop set that he checked all the way to the river. It's kind of odd, and then decides to turn it into a bluff when the board reads it straight. Don't really like his play here. I think it's a pretty big punt. He's just always getting called by 6, and people are going to get sticky here and may even look him up with just the board. So I think generally he either chops small percentage of the time he wins, or most of the time he just loses to a 6. So don't like the play, but we're happy to scoop a pretty big pot. In this hand, we're on the button, the best position in poker, and we look down at the best hand in poker, pocket aces. Folds all the way to us, and we make it 15 and just a small blind calls. Small blind is an older gentleman. He's shown to be pretty wild and active in this game. He stacked off a second pair in one hand. He ripped 400 over a raise and a call with pocket 7s. So we're definitely against a wild one. So hopefully we can win a big pot and get some value here. Flop comes 7-7-8 with 2 diamonds. He checks to us. We bet $20. He raises up to 50. We have an easy call. Yeah, he can have a 7 here, but he can also have a bunch of draws, maybe an 8. Any random 2 cards by his image earlier in the game. Turn comes Queen of Clubs and he checks. This is where I think we made a pretty big mistake here. I think there's no reason not to keep betting, especially against this player type. Go for some more value. I'd imagine if he did have a 7, he's barreling the turn 100% of the time. So I think checking back is pretty poor from us here, and it's going to cost us some value, as I think he would probably be calling the turn after he check raises, especially if he has a draw. Any pair, I don't think this guy is capable of folding, so definitely a mistake on our part. But anyways, we check it back and the river comes to 7, giving us a full house. Only lose to a 7. He bets 25, pretty tiny bet. I think he never has a 7 here. I think we could raise to like 70 and make sure we always get called. But I think being greedy, especially at these limits, it's usually pretty good. And generally, bad players don't like to fold full houses. So when he bets 25, we stick him all in for his last 250 more. Thanks. For about 30 seconds before eventually making the fold. I think maybe we would have got a call if we raised it to like 70, but I think overall I'm happy to be greedy and go for the max in these spots, because when you do get paid, you get paid big. This hand does 2 limps in early position. Middle position bumps it up to 15. We call in the cutoff with Jack 9 of diamonds. I think a 3-bet is also fine here with this hand, and especially in tougher lineups, it's probably better as a 3-bet, but in these low stakes weak lineups, we're happy to call along with these somewhat suited connected hands and play some multi-way pots. One of the limpers folds, but the other one calls. We go 3 ways to a flop. Comes 9-6-7 with 2 spades and 1 diamond. Pretty good flop for us here with top pair, backdoor flush draw, backdoor straight draw. There's 45 in the middle. Checks to the original raiser who bets 25. I think we have a pretty easy call here. We call. Early position calls. Turn comes to King of Spades, bringing in the flush. Checks to us. Don't see any reason in us betting here. We may have the best hand. We've good showdown value. Don't want to put money in the pocket, raise, get blown off our hand. So we decide to just check it back. River comes 9 of clubs. Early position checks. So I think early position never has a flush now. When he checks the turn, checks the river. Also, I don't think the opener would ever have a flush, because he'd barrel the turn when he hits his flush, especially into 2 players. So we're pretty confident we have the best hand here, and we're even more confident when the original raiser bets 25 into 120. It's a tiny bet. Don't think he'd ever choose this sizing with any really strong hands. A flush, a full house, it's pretty unlikely. So we've an easy raise for value. We decide on a sizing of 125. He thinks, looks at me, thinks again, and decides he wants to look us up and see what I have. We show him the bad news, turn over our trip 9s, gives us the nod of approval and sends his card into the muck. Pick up another pretty nice pot there. We're running hot tonight. So in this hand, there's 2 limps in early position. We look down at ace 10 off and make it 20 in the hijack. Button calls and the 2 limper calls. Flop comes king 10 4, checks to us. We check to the button, don't really see any merit in betting here. We might have the best hand with second pair top kicker. Don't want to bloat the pot, so we just check, button checks back. Turn comes a 6 and it checks to us again. Now I think we can comfortably start going for some value. I'd expect the button to bet a king on the flop when checked to, and I'd expect the 2 guys in early position to bet a king on the turn. So I'm confident we have the best hand now. We can get value from some worse tens or some pocket pairs. We don't need to go too big. We bet 30 into 80 and just the button calls. River comes an offsuit 3. There's now 140 in the middle and we have a decision here. So I think we probably have the best hand, but the real decision comes down to, do we want to check and let the villain bluff and bluff catch our hand, or do we want to bet for value? I think when he checks the flop, he probably doesn't have a king. So his main draw that misses will be queen jack, but I also think he will bet that on the flop. So given that I think he bets these hands, I think we want to go for value instead. We bet 60, he calls, we show, and he mucks. I think this is a clear spot where people probably look and see second pair. We should probably check the river, but one thing I've noticed, especially the difference between people who are winning in these games and the people who are beating the game at a high clip, comes down to how thin they're going for value. I've noticed the best players are always looking for value, no matter how thin it is. If they think they can get called by worse, they're going for value, and that's makes a big difference to your win rate. So I think looking at this hand, you should look at it and recognise the spots where, yes, I don't have top pair here, but the way it played out, I think I have the best hand, so I should definitely go for value. If we just check the river, he probably checks back and we lose out on $60. But if you do that 100, 500 times a year, depending on how much you're playing, that's a big difference to your win rate. In this next pot, there's 2 limps in early position and we look down at jack 7 of diamonds in the cutoff. Again, it's probably slightly too loose to open, but we're running well. I think we're playing well, so we're happy to have a spin with these hands against worse opposition. We bump it up to 20, small blind calls, big blind calls, and the 2 limpers decide to call. We're going 5 ways to a flop and it comes down a good one. Comes ace queen 3 with 2 diamonds. We flop the second nut flush draw. It's as happy as we could be when you open a hand like jack 7 of diamonds. It's a pretty good flop. Checks to us and we see bet 30% pot. Don't think we need to go big here, especially multi-way. We just use a small sizing with our strongest hand and our strongest draws. Just early position calls. He's the wild guy from the hand earlier with the aces on the 7-7-7 run out board. He's shown to be pretty active and pretty wild all night. Turn comes the 8 of diamonds, giving us the flush. There's now 160 in the middle and we bet 85. He looks us up again. River comes down a 3. He checks and we stick him all in for his last 200. He doesn't think that long in deciding that he wants to call. He flicks in the chip. We show him the bad news. We've jack 7 of diamonds for a flush and he turns over ace 9 off. Shows how this player is just very sticky post flop. Once he flops his pair, he's pretty happy to go all the way with it, and we pick up another pretty nice sized pot. We're definitely running very hot tonight. We have a spicy hand here. We look down at red pocket 3s, open to 10 under the gun, cut off calls, button. There's an older lady raises to 30. There's probably a pretty strong raise, so we're going to come along and set mine the 3s and the cut off folds. Heads up to a flop, 70 in the middle, it comes 9-7-6 rainbow. We check and she bets 30. She probably has a lot of overpairs, maybe an ace king. We're in bad shape against the overpairs, winning against ace king, but we decide to call with some bad intentions of getting spicy on some runouts. Turn comes a 7 of spades, bringing in the flush draw. There's 130 in the middle. We check. She bets 30 again. Really small bet. Don't think she'd ever 3-bet a 7 pre, so we're pretty confident that this hand isn't in our range, but we can credibly rep 7. We've been playing pretty active all night, so I think we want to get spicy here. We bump it up to 110 as a bluff. She calls. Another factor in this play was we'd seen her fold aces on a board that ran out of flush to a jam earlier. She showed the aces and the guy showed the flush, so she did make the correct fold, but this tells me that she's definitely capable of making big folds. So after we bump it to 110 and she calls, river falls, jack of spades, completing the flush, and some straights get there. There was also a flop straight out there we can probably credibly rep. We jam all in, she tanks, folds, shows us kings face up, we tell her nice fold, we had it, and muck the bluff. So that wraps up episode 3. Thanks for tuning in. We were into the game for $400, out for $17.75 for a total profit of $13.75. So stay tuned for episode 4. We're probably going to step it up in the next episode, play some 2-5, up in the stakes, up in the ante. So see you then. Peace.